4.3, determine the scope of the organization. The agenda for today is who is Crest Advisory Africa and CAA's offerings, understanding the HLS, the high-level structure of Clause 4.3, practical implementation model for Clause 4.3, then any questions and how to contact Crest Advisory Africa. So who are we? Crest Advisory Africa has been established by Nico Snyman, the founder and CEO of CAA, on the 13th of June in 2014. So that means that we are 12 years old this year. CAA is contracted with 3 certification bodies, namely PCB for People Certification, so that is for the ISO training that we do through PCB. MECCB and DQS do ISO Management Systems certifications, and we are auditors, certified auditors through MECCB and DQS. Then the offerings from Crest Advisory Africa is firstly international certified ISO training in over 58 disciplines, such as risk management, security operations management, business continuity, information security, quality management. The latest is artificial intelligence management system, compliance management, and anti-bribery, just to mention a few. Advisory services as experts in the corporate governance ecosystems. We can do advisory services in quality management, information security, environmental, compliance management, artificial intelligence, and risk management, to mention a few. Leadership development, leadership coaching worksheets, leadership worksheet analysis, benchmark analysis, optimal placement of resources, employee support and development, teams analysis and optimization, as well as employee wellness. Auditing services. We do internal audits, risk-based audits, sustainability audits, compliance audits, and second and third-party audits. Crest Advisory Africa has Isolytics GRC software that was developed by Crest Advisory Africa. It includes the following modules: risk management, audit compliance, document management, checklist, know your customer, asset management software, business impact analysis, and many more. Then we do international ISO certification audits through MECCB and DQS in ISO 18788, security operations management, business continuity, information security, quality management, environmental management, compliance management, and artificial intelligence. So practical focus on Clause 4.3, determining the scope. So why is Clause 4.3 important in an organization? In every well-governed organization, there must be clarity about what the management system actually covers. Many organizations invest time in building policies, procedures, controls, and governance frameworks, yet they overlook the one most critical question: where does the management system start and where does it stop? Clause 4.3 of the high-level structure addresses exactly that question. It requires organizations to determine the scope of the management system, which means defining the boundaries and the applicability of the system. It is a strategic decision, not an administrative decision. So Clause 4.3 requires the organization to determine the boundaries and applicability of its management system. This means defining which parts of the organization is included, which locations are covered, which processes fall inside the system, which activities are subject to governance controls. The outcome must be clearly defined, documented, communicated, and consistently applied. Without this clarity, the management system becomes fragmented and difficult to audit and or manage. So the scope of a management system is not decided in isolation. It is derived from 2 important organizational analyses. The organizational context. The organization must consider its operating environment, regulatory landscape, strategic objectives, operational structure, technological dependencies. If an organization operates across multiple regions or business units, this context influences what must be included in your management system. Then stakeholder expectations. Stakeholders influence scope through their expectations. For example, regulators expecting compliance coverage, customers expecting service assurance, boards expecting governance oversight, and partners expecting operational reliability. If these expectations are relevant to the organization's success, they influence the boundaries of the system. So in a well-defined management system, the scope typically describes these three things. Firstly, what the organization does, so the organization's activities. So it should describe the products that are delivered, the services that you are providing, and the core operational activities of the organization. Where the activities occur, so the location. Is it head office, regional offices, operational facilities, digital environments, or remote working environments? And then who and what are involved, so organizational elements. So that the scope must reflect your departments, systems, processes, personnel, and technologies that you are including in your scope. These elements together determine the real operational footprint of the management system. And clause 4.3 introduces two important concepts, boundaries and applicability. Boundaries defines where the system begins and ends, for example, or the organizational units, the business divisions, physical locations, maybe head office and satellite offices, or head office and data centers, operational processes, which could be your sales or your procurement. Applicability determines which requirements of the management system apply within those boundaries. So logical justification for limitations, alignment with operational realities. So many organizations experience audit findings because scope mistakes. They didn't define their scopes properly. For example, it could be artificially narrow scope, so limiting the system to a single location, even though governance decisions affect the entire organization. Excluding technology while relying on them. Organizations sometimes exclude IT environments while all operations depend on them. Vague scope statements, descriptions such as related activities or supporting services, often lead to clarification requests from auditors. Scope that does not match reality. Auditors often test scope by following transactions, operational processes, and/or information flows. So if an organization wants to get certified and there is a specific process that's included in the scope, the organization has to ensure that the full workflow of the process is included in the scope and not just part of the process. Outsource activities and responsibility. A critical principle applies when activities are outsourced. Even when a supplier performs a process, the organization remains responsible for the outcome. The organization may exclude the supplier organization itself, but cannot exclude the responsibility for controlling the outsourced process. Effective governance requires oversight of these external dependencies. We've seen it where we've audited, where organizations do not include the outsourced activities because they say those people do not report to them directly. It is through a SLA, maybe they report to the procurement department, but still they are doing work that should have been done through that department itself. So you can't walk away from that responsibility. You have to ensure that you include it in your scope. So defining your scope is not simply documentation. Anyone that's gone through ISO training will know that in almost every page in the training, it says, keep documented information as evidence. And the scope isn't just another document that you need to keep as evidence. It is leadership decision about accountability. The scope determines the boundaries of governance oversight, the reach of risk management, the coverage of assurance activities, and the credibility of the management system. For mature organizations, scope is treated as a strategic boundary decision. So let's look at the practical implementation for defining the scope. Clause 4.3. Step 1, analyze organizational context. So you should review your operational structure, your external environment that you operate in, your regulatory requirements. What are the rules and regulations, the laws and regulations that you need to adhere to be able to do business in the environment that you are in? This information is already available because you've done that in clause 4.1, understanding the organization and its context. So use that information. Then consider step 2, consider stakeholder expectations. Identify relevant expectations from regulators, customers, leadership, and or your partners. Those are the requirements from clause 4.2, needs and expectations of interested parties, which you've done already as well. Then step 3, map products, services, and processes. So clarify what the organization delivers. What products and services do the organization have? How the delivery occurs? Which functions supports it? Then step 4, define your boundaries. Specify organizational units. So is it in specific departments, projects, or subsidiaries that you are including in your scope or that you can draw the boundary line around? Is it specific locations? Can you say that it's this office building in this street? Do you have data centers maybe, or you have satellite offices that you need to include in these locations? So you can, on a map, draw lines and show them that these are the ones that you are including. Technologies, business processes such as sales or technology, the scope should include networks, apps, operating systems, databases, and processes. Your key processes are business processes such as sales and procurement or HR. Then document your scope. So the scope statement should be clear, realistic, defensible, aligned with organizational reality. So you must remember that the process of defining the scope statement is completed at top management level. They can, of course, use subject matter experts such as consultants and analysts to assist, but it's a top management decision that needs to be made. The scope statement should be understandable to external parties and those with limited knowledge about the organization. It must be precise enough to show what is covered in the scope. So anyone that doesn't really know the organization or the products or services that you supply, if they read the scope statement, they will still be able to understand what is included in your scope. Then common audit findings. The scope is not properly defined. So those steps were not worked through. You didn't do clause 4.1, context of the organization and the needs and expectations of your interested parties. Exclusions are not justified. So, if you're implementing any ISO standard, you will be required to adhere to all requirements from clause 4 to 10. If there's any of those clauses that is not applicable on your organization, let's say, for example, in ISO 18788, Security Operations Management System, in the operations clause 8, it talks about weapons. In some countries, security is not allowed to have any weapons on them. Only the police services are allowed to carry weapons. So that will be an exclusion from that standard in your scope. And you will justify to say that is the law of the land, that you are not allowed to carry weapons. So if there's any of the exclusions, if there's any of the clauses that you need to exclude in your scope, you will need to justify it properly to tell the certification body why it is being excluded. Then the scope not reviewed of the major change. So maybe you have brought in a new product or a new process and you did not add them in your scope. Or you didn't even review the scope to see if it should be included in your scope. Or there's no evidence of management involvement in defining the scope. Remember on the previous slide we said that it's a top management level function. They need to define the scope. Then in an integrated management system, so one of the advantages of the high-level structure is the ability to operate one integrated management system across multiple disciplines. So it doesn't matter which standard you are implementing, ISO 9001, 14001, 22301, quality, environment, business continuity, information security, you can use the same scope and just ensure that you include everything in your scope. So that means the organization can define one overarching management system scope with additional clarifications where necessary. This approach improves efficiency and it reduces duplication as well as costs. So the strategic value of Clause 4.3, when properly implemented, Clause 4.3 provides significant governance benefits. It clarifies accountability boundaries. It strengthens organizations' transparency. It aligns risk, compliance, and assurance activities. It prevents governance gaps, and it protects organizational credibility. In essence, Clause 4.3 defines what the organization is prepared to stand behind. And then closing thoughts. Understanding context is important. Identifying stakeholders is essential, but determining scope is where leadership translates understanding into commitment. A well-defined scope ensures that the management system operates within clear defensible boundaries. When those boundaries are clear, governance becomes stronger, audits become smoother, and organizational accountability becomes visible. Are there any questions from your side? If you are watching this video on YouTube or through our website, you can always contact us at Nico at Crest Advisory Africa or Karina at Crest Advisory Africa, or go to our website, crestadvisoryafrica.com, and contact us through our website and send us any questions that you might have, and we will respond to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.